The Crimson Fleet's arrival. The massive Crimson ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, like blood drops against the star-filled darkness. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the alien fleet through the reinforced viewport. The ships were unlike anything in human records, their hulls gleaming with an organic sheen that seemed to pulse with internal light. "How many?" Chen asked without turning from the window. Lieutenant Marcus Webb checked his scanner readings for the third time, hoping the numbers would change. 217 vessels, Commander. The largest one is, it's impossible, 30 kilometers long. Chen finally turned from the viewport. At 45, she had spent her entire adult life in Earth's Defense Command, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. Her graying hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes held the weight of countless difficult decisions. She had never expected to face a decision like this. Signal from the alien fleet, Commander, came the voice of Communications Officer Riley from across the command center. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, in perfect English. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that would haunt human nightmares for generations. Commander Zethak of the Crimson Fleet stood nearly 3 meters tall, his elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. His skin was deep red like dried blood, and his head was crowned with bone spikes that gleamed in the light of his ship's bridge. Most disturbing were his eyes, completely black orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Humans of the third planet." Zethak's voice was like grinding stone, translated by technology that rendered his words in perfect, emotionless English. "I am Commander Zethak of the Crimson Fleet. Your species has been evaluated and found adequate for our purposes." Chen stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in perfect military posture. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. State your intentions." Zethak's lipless mouth stretched into what might have been a smile. "Intentions. We do not negotiate with lesser species. You will surrender your worlds and serve the Crimson Empire, or you will be eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is notification." "And if we refuse?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. The alien commander gestured with one clawed hand. "Then you will witness the power of the Void Renderer." The transmission cut to an external view, showing the massive flagship of the Crimson Fleet. Along its hull, panels were sliding open to reveal a structure that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to bend space around itself, creating distortions that made Chen's eyes water. The weapon was spherical, but appeared to exist in more dimensions than human minds could process. "All stations, this is Chen." She broadcast across all military channels. "Unknown hostile fleet has entered the system with apparent hostile intent. All defense platforms are to charge weapons and prepare for combat operations." Lieutenant Webb moved to her side, his young face pale. "Commander, we have maybe 50 combat-capable ships in the entire system. Their smallest vessel is larger than our biggest dreadnought." Chen nodded grimly. "Signal the alien commander that we need time to consider their ultimatum." "How much time do you think he'll give us?" Webb asked. "Long enough to demonstrate their weapon," Chen replied. "They want us to see what happens to those who refuse." She was right. Within minutes, the Void Renderer began to glow with an otherworldly light. Space itself seemed to ripple around the weapon as it powered up. On every screen throughout the solar system, humans watched in horror as the weapon fired. The beam that emerged from the Void Renderer was not visible light, but something that registered on instruments as a complete absence of everything. Where it touched space, reality simply ended. The beam reached Pluto in seconds, and when it made contact, the distant dwarf planet didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but completely removed from reality, as if it had never been. The gravitational effects that had marked Pluto's presence vanished instantly. Space filled the void where a world had been moments before. Across Earth's communication networks, emergency broadcasts carried the impossible news. Pluto was gone. Not a trace remained, not even debris. The entire planet had been erased from existence. "My God," whispered Webb. "How do you fight something like that?" Chen stared at the empty space where Pluto had been, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. Every scenario ended the same way. Humanity had no weapons that could threaten ships of that size, no shields that could stop a weapon that erased matter from existence. "Commander," Riley called from the communications station. "The alien fleet is broadcasting again." Zethek reappeared on the main screen, his black eyes fixed directly on Chen as if he could see her across the vast distance. "You have witnessed the fate of those who resist the Crimson Empire. Your planet called Pluto no longer exists. It has been removed from the timeline itself, as if it never was." The alien commander leaned forward slightly. "You have one of your planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally. Refuse, and we will demonstrate the Void Renderer's power on your homeworld. There will be no negotiation, no compromise. Submit or be unmade." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Around Chen, her officers waited for orders that could determine the fate of humanity itself. "Options?" Chen asked quietly. Commander Phillips, head of strategic planning, spoke first. "Surrender might save some lives. If we fight, they'll wipe us out completely." "You saw what they did to Pluto," countered Captain Rodriguez, Earth's most experienced fighter pilot. "That weapon doesn't leave survivors. It erases everything it touches. Surrendering just means dying slowly instead of quickly." Chen walked back to the viewport, looking out at Earth hanging in space below the lunar station. 3 billion people lived on that blue world, unaware that their entire existence hung in the balance. Children were playing in parks, couples were falling in love, scientists were making discoveries that would never be shared. All of it could vanish in an instant. "What about the outer colonies?" she asked. "Mars base is preparing to evacuate deeper into the asteroid belt," Webb reported. "The Jupiter mining stations are powering down and going dark. If Earth falls, maybe some of our people will survive out there." Chen turned back to her officers. "Send a message to every human settlement in the system, every military base, every research station, every mining operation. Tell them what we're facing." "And tell them what, exactly?" Phillips asked. Chen straightened her shoulders, and for a moment, every person in the command center understood why she had been chosen to lead Earth's defenses. "Tell them we're going to fight." The silence that followed was broken by Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath. "Commander, with respect, we can't win this. They have superior numbers, superior technology, and a weapon that can erase planets." "You're right," Chen agreed. "We can't win a conventional battle. But humans have never been conventional." She moved to the central command console, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Lieutenant Webb, I want you to contact every ship captain, every station commander, every person with access to anything that flies or shoots. Tell them to prepare for Operation Last Light." Webb's eyes widened. Operation Last Light was a theoretical battle plan that had never been seriously considered for implementation. It assumed that conventional tactics would fail and that victory could only be achieved through desperate, seemingly suicidal measures. "Commander," Phillips protested, "Last Light assumes we're willing to sacrifice entire fleets for marginal tactical advantages. The casualty projections err." 100%, Chen finished. "I know. But the alternative is watching our entire species get erased from history." She looked around the room at faces filled with fear and determination in equal measure. "The Crimson Fleet expects us to fight like civilized beings, following rules of engagement and military doctrine. They expect us to value our own lives above victory." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They don't understand humans. We've spent our entire history finding ways to win impossible battles. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have destroyed us 100 times over. We've never known when to quit." Captain Rodriguez stood up straighter. "What are your orders, Commander?" Chen looked out at the stars, where the Crimson ships waited with their reality-ending weapon. We're going to show them that some things are worth any sacrifice, even if it means none of us live to see tomorrow. Across the solar system, a message went out to every human settlement. The Crimson Fleet had given humanity one day to surrender. Instead, humanity was preparing to do what it had always done when faced with impossible odds. It was preparing to fight back. In the asteroid belt, miners loaded their cargo ships with explosive charges. On Mars, engineers worked frantically to convert atmospheric processors into weapons. In the outer system, the crew of a deep space research vessel began calculations that would turn their ship into the largest kinetic weapon in human history. The Crimson Fleet had erased Pluto to demonstrate their power. They were about to learn that sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is one with nothing left to lose. Commander Zethak stood on his bridge, confident that the humans would surrender as every other species had. His instruments detected frantic activity throughout the human system, but he interpreted it as preparation for evacuation or surrender. In his long career of conquest, no species had ever chosen to fight when faced with the Void Renderer. He had no idea that humanity was different. Earth's last stand and the impossible victory. 23 hours after the ultimatum, the Crimson Fleet began moving toward Earth. Commander Zethak expected to find a defeated enemy waiting to surrender. Instead, his sensors detected something unprecedented in his experience of conquest. Every human ship in the solar system was moving toward the fleet. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, confusion evident in the alien's voice. "The humans appear to be mounting an offensive. Their entire fleet is approaching our position." Zethak studied the tactical display with growing irritation. 57 human vessels of various sizes were indeed moving to intercept his fleet. Most were clearly converted civilian ships, cargo haulers, and mining vessels fitted with improvised weapons. A few appeared to be purpose-built warships, though they were tiny compared to even his smallest escort vessels. "Foolish," Zethak muttered. "They choose destruction over servitude. Very well. All ships, prepare to engage. Show them the futility of resistance." But as the human fleet closed to engagement range, they did something no enemy had ever done before. Instead of forming battle lines or attempting to flank his formation, they scattered in every direction while continuing to advance. Some ships dove below the plane of battle, others climbed high above it. Several vessels appeared to be heading directly for the Star Crusher itself. "Tactical analysis," Zethak demanded. "Unknown, Commander. Their formation appears random, almost chaotic. No discernible strategy." Zethak's black eyes narrowed. In 2 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered a species that fought without formation or strategy. Begin long-range bombardment. Destroy the closest vessels. The Crimson Fleet's weapons opened fire, streams of energy that could vaporize asteroids reaching out toward the approaching human ships. But the humans weren't where the weapons expected them to be. They had been accelerating and decelerating randomly, making targeting nearly impossible at long range. The first human ship to die was the cargo hauler Prosperity, converted into a missile platform by the desperate miners of Ceres Station. It took 17 direct hits before its reactor finally exploded, but in its death throes, it launched every missile it carried. Hundreds of warheads streaked toward the Crimson Fleet, most of them improvised weapons that would barely scratch the aliens' armor. But some of those missiles weren't conventional weapons at all. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent the last day working with a team of physicists aboard the research vessel Discovery, hidden deep in the asteroid belt. They had studied the readings from the Void Renderer's attack on Pluto and made a desperate gamble based on theoretical physics. If the weapon works by creating localized reality distortions, Vasquez had explained to Commander Chen during their final communication, then it might be vulnerable to quantum interference. We're loading our missiles with quantum field generators. If we can create enough interference in the right pattern. The modified missiles struck the Star Crusher's hull and exploded not with fire, but with bursts of twisted space-time. The effect was minimal, barely registering on the massive ship's sensors, but it was enough to create tiny fluctuations in the Void Renderer's targeting matrix. Zithak felt the slight vibration through his ship's hull and dismissed it as insignificant battle damage. He was focused on a more pressing concern. The human ships that had seemed to scatter randomly were now converging on his fleet from multiple directions simultaneously, and they were accelerating far beyond what their engines should have allowed. "How are they moving so fast?" he demanded. The tactical officer's instruments showed impossible readings. "Commander, several of their ships appear to have removed their safety systems entirely. Their engines are running at dangerous overload levels." Captain Maria Santos commanded the destroyer Defiant, one of Earth's few actual warships. She stood on her bridge, surrounded by readings that showed her ship's engines operating at 150% capacity, far beyond safe limits. The entire vessel shook with barely contained power, and her engineering officer had warned that the reactor could fail at any moment. "How long until we reach the enemy flagship?" she asked. 90 seconds at current speed," her navigator replied. "But Commander, at this acceleration, we won't be able to stop or turn. We're committed to a collision course." Santos nodded grimly. "That's the idea. All hands, prepare for impact. It's been an honor serving with you." The Defiant was one of 12 human ships on direct collision courses with the Star Crusher. Each ship had removed every safety system, pushed their engines beyond all limits, and pointed themselves at the massive alien vessel like guided missiles. Their crews knew they wouldn't survive, but they also knew their sacrifice might give the rest of humanity a chance. Zithak watched the approaching ships with growing alarm. "All defensive batteries. Target those vessels. They mean to ram us." The Star Crusher's defensive guns opened fire, filling space with deadly energy. 3 human ships died before reaching their target, their hulls vaporized by direct hits, but 9 ships made it through, slamming into the Star Crusher's hull at incredible velocity. The impact sent shockwaves through the massive alien vessel. While they couldn't penetrate the Star Crusher's heavy armor, they damaged sensor arrays, weapon batteries, and most importantly, they created enough vibration to disrupt the Void Renderer's delicate quantum matrix even further. Commander Chen watched the battle unfold from her command post aboard the lunar station. Each red dot that disappeared from her tactical display represented dozens of human lives, lost, friends and colleagues who had chosen death over surrender. But their sacrifice was having an effect. "The alien flagship is showing signs of damage," Lieutenant Webb reported. "Multiple hull breaches, and their big weapon isn't powering up as quickly as before." "Good," Chen said quietly. "Signal Phase 2. Across the battlefield, the second wave of human ships began their attack runs. But these vessels weren't aiming for the Star Crusher. Instead, they targeted the Crimson Fleet's smaller escorts, using tactics that horrified their enemies. The mining ship Iron Mountain had been loaded with refined uranium from the Jupiter mining stations. As it approached a Crimson cruiser, Captain Liu made a final transmission: "For everyone who'll never go home." Then he overloaded his ship's reactor while still carrying 10 tons of fissile material. The resulting explosion was visible from Earth. The blast vaporized the mining ship and crippled the alien cruiser, but more importantly, it scattered radioactive debris across a wide area of space. Other human ships were already moving through that debris field, their hulls becoming contaminated with radiation that would kill their crews within hours. But radiation also interfered with the Crimson Fleet's sensors and targeting systems in ways they had never encountered before. "Commander," Zithak's tactical officer called out in alarm, "we're losing sensor resolution. The humans are using some kind of jamming technology." It wasn't jamming technology. It was desperation and human ingenuity combined with a willingness to die for something greater than themselves. The radioactive debris was creating sensor shadows that allowed the surviving human ships to get closer to their targets. Among those ships was the research vessel Discovery, carrying Dr. Vasquez and her team of physicists. They had spent the battle studying the Void Renderer's energy signatures, looking for any weakness they could exploit. "There," Vasquez shouted, pointing at her instruments. "The quantum interference is working. The weapon's targeting matrix is becoming unstable." Commander Chen received the transmission and felt hope for the first time since the battle began. All remaining ships converge on the enemy flagship. Maximum acceleration, all weapons free. The final phase of Operation Last Light began as the surviving human vessels, most of them damaged and running on failing systems, made one last desperate charge at the Star Crusher. They came from every direction at once, their crews knowing they were about to die, but determined to make their deaths count. Zethak felt his ship shuddering under multiple impacts as human vessels rammed his escorts or exploded against his hull. His tactical display showed chaos, with human ships appearing and disappearing in the sensor interference like ghosts. For the first time in his career, he felt something approaching fear. "Fire the Void Renderer," he commanded. "End this." But when his weapons officer activated the reality-erasing weapon, it didn't respond as expected. The quantum interference from hundreds of small explosions and the accumulated damage to the targeting matrix had created instabilities in the weapon's operation. Instead of the focused beam that had destroyed Pluto, the Void Renderer fired a diffuse wave of reality-distorting energy that washed harmlessly over the human fleet. The weapon that could erase planets couldn't target individual ships when its quantum matrix was destabilized. "Impossible," Zethak roared. "How are they interfering with our technology?" The answer came in the form of Commander Chen's personal assault shuttle, one of the last functional human craft in the battle. She had left Luna Station against all tactical sense, determined to face the enemy commander personally. Chen's shuttle was tiny compared to the Star Crusher, but it carried the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed, a human being who refused to give up. She guided her craft through gaps in the alien ship's defenses, using manual piloting skills that no computer could match. The shuttle's hull was breached in 3 places, its life support was failing, and Chen was bleeding from a head wound, but she held course until she reached her target, the Star Crusher's main hangar bay. Chen crashed her shuttle into the hangar, using the last of her ship's power to overload its reactor. The explosion was small compared to the massive alien vessel, but it opened a breach that allowed her to board the Star Crusher itself. Armed with nothing but a standard sidearm and emergency supplies, Commander Sarah Chen began making her way through the alien ship toward its bridge. She encountered Crimson Fleet crew members who were twice her size and armed with weapons that could vaporize her instantly, but they had never faced an enemy who fought with the desperate creativity of someone protecting their home. Chen used the ship's own systems against its crew, overloading power conduits to create explosions, reversing gravity in corridors to confuse her pursuers, and turning the Star Crusher's automated systems into weapons by feeding them false data. When she finally reached the bridge, Zethak was waiting for her with his personal guard. The alien commander towered over the small human, his claws gleaming in the light of his ship's dying systems. Impressive for a lesser species, Zethak admitted, but ultimately futile. "Kill her." Chen smiled, and Zethak felt a chill at the expression on her face. "You still don't understand," she said quietly. "We're not trying to win. We're trying to make sure you lose." She activated the device she had carried through the alien ship, a quantum field generator salvaged from Dr. Vasquez's research. At close range to the Void Renderer's control systems, the interference was catastrophic. The reality-erasing weapon began tearing itself apart as conflicting quantum fields created a cascade failure. Across the Star Crusher, systems began shutting down as the ship's power core tried to compensate for the massive energy drain. Zethak struck Chen down with one clawed hand, but it was too late. The damage was spreading throughout his fleet as the Void Renderer's failure created quantum shockwaves that interfered with every piece of Crimson technology in the system. As Commander Chen lay dying on the alien bridge, she heard something she had never expected to hear, the sound of Crimson Fleet ships powering down their weapons. Zethak knelt beside the fallen human commander, his black eyes reflecting something that might have been respect. "Why?" he asked. "Why did your species choose death over servitude?" Chen struggled to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Because some things are worth dying for. You'll never understand that. And that's why you'll never really win." As Chen's life faded, Zethek stood and looked around his damaged rage. His fleet was crippled, his superweapon was destroyed, and he had lost more ships to 57 human vessels than he had lost in 20 previous conquests combined. But more importantly, he had learned something about humanity that changed everything. They didn't fight to live. They fought for something greater than themselves, something worth any sacrifice. 3 days later, a transmission reached Earth from the surviving Crimson Fleet vessels. Commander Zethek appeared on screens across the planet, but his message was not what anyone expected. "Humans of Earth," the alien commander began, "your Commander Chen died well. She showed us something we had never encountered in 2 centuries of conquest, a species that values honor above survival." Zethek paused, his alien features showing what might have been regret. The Crimson Empire has always taken what it wanted from lesser species, but you are not lesser. You are something we have never been, willing to die for others. The transmission continued with words that would echo through human history. "The Crimson Fleet withdraws from your system. More than that, we offer alliance instead of conquest. Teach us to fight as you fight, to care as you care. Show us how to be worthy of the sacrifice your people made." The war that was supposed to end with humanity's extinction instead ended with the birth of something new. An alliance between species based not on conquest, but on mutual respect earned through courage and sacrifice. Commander Sarah Chen never lived to see the peace her sacrifice had made possible, but her name was remembered on both Earth and in the distant worlds of the Crimson Empire. She had proven that humanity's greatest weapon was not any technology or military strategy. It was the simple human refusal to give up, especially when fighting for something worth dying for. The stars belong to humanity now, not through conquest, but through the respect earned by those willing to give everything for the chance that others might live free.